Have you ever really thought about what it takes to turn a simple piece of paper into a legally binding truth? I mean, it's not just some form you sign. It's this whole fascinating system, a kind of performance that takes what you know personally and makes it something the law can actually use. So let's dive into this incredible legal tool, the affidavit.
So, right off the bat, here's the central puzzle we're tackling. How does a statement, something you just write down, suddenly get the power and weight of objective fact in a court of law? Well, the answer is this really carefully constructed ritual of verification, and it all centers on the affidavit. At its core, this is what an affidavit is. The source material calls it a juridical instrument of truth certification. It's basically a bridge, right? It connects what's in your head, the words you use to describe it, and the legal system that needs to rely on it. This is where your personal story officially meets public law. Okay, to really get how this works, let's imagine it's a kind of spiral of verification with all these different layers of trust. And it all kicks off with the very first layer, the internal moral commitment that the person writing the statement makes. It all starts with a promise. You know, the oldest version of this promise is the oath. When you swear an oath, you're tying your words not just to the law, but to a higher power, some kind of metaphysical consequence. You're basically saying, my statement is so true, I am willing to stake my soul on it. This ancient practice really elevates speech into something sacred. But, okay, what if you don't believe in that kind of divine accountability? Well, the law has an answer for that too, the affirmation. It's the modern, secular version. Instead of calling on a higher power, you're grounding your promise in your own moral compass and your duty as a citizen. It's a commitment based purely on personal integrity. Now check this out. What's so interesting here is how flexible the legal system is. Whether your sense of accountability is divine or civic, whether it's based on religious faith or your own moral code, the law recognizes both paths. The only thing that really matters is that solemn promise to be truthful. And underneath it all, whether it's an oath or an affirmation, lies this fundamental idea: good faith. It's the quiet assumption that you are acting sincerely without any intention to deceive anybody. The source calls it the invisible ethical infrastructure of the whole thing. And honestly, without it, the entire system just falls apart. All right, so you've made the promise. Now we move to the next layer in our spiral, the actual act of writing. This is where your internal knowledge gets translated into the very precise, very formal language of a legal document. And this act is called the declaration. This is the real turning point. It's the moment your thought, your memory, your knowledge is literally born as a piece of evidence. It's not just in your head anymore, it's a self-contained statement that someone can now use in a legal fight. I just love this quote from the source material. Atoms of legal argument. It's perfect. It captures just how crucial these seemingly simple statements of fact are. Entire cases, really complex legal strategies, they all depend on these tiny, incredibly powerful micro-units of declared truth. But, and this is important, the law is super specific about how you know something. There's a massive difference between personal knowledge, what you actually saw, heard, and experienced yourself, and information and belief, which is stuff you sincerely think is true based on what other people told you. An affidavit has to be crystal clear about which is which. So now we get to the third layer, the ritual. A signed piece of paper on its own is, well, just a piece of paper. To become an affidavit, it has to go through this formal process of external validation that gives it its legal muscle. And the key player in this whole ritual is the Notary Public. The source calls them the civic priesthood of truth, which is just such a powerful image, isn't it? They're the guardians of the process, a representative of the state's authority whose whole job is to witness and confirm that you are who you say you are and you signed what you said you were going to sign. So it's all about this step-by-step process. First, you make your declaration. Second, you sign it, physically linking your identity to those words. Third, the notary watches you do it. And fourth, the notary adds their own certification and seal. It's called a jurat. And that final act is what completes the transformation from a private statement into official evidence. So, the document is official. Great. Let's move to our fourth layer and see how it's actually used. Now that we have this validated instrument, what does it actually do? How does it work out there in the real world of law? Well, it has a lot of jobs. It serves as written testimony, which is way more permanent and stable than human memory. You can attach exhibits to it, things like photos or receipts, to ground its claims in physical reality.
It provides the factual backbone for legal requests, which are called motions, and once it's filed, it becomes part of the permanent public record, all within the context of a lawsuit, which is really its whole reason for existing.
Okay, this brings us to the fifth and maybe the most important layer of our spiral, accountability. This entire system we've just walked through only works because that initial promise of truth is backed up by some very, very serious consequences for being dishonest. And that consequence has a name: perjury. This isn't just telling a lie, it's knowingly making a false statement after you've sworn an oath or made an affirmation. It's a direct assault on the very foundation of the process. It's the one thing that can corrupt the entire system from the inside out. The source document describes perjury with this incredibly deep phrase, the ontological betrayal of the affidavit. What that means is, it's not just a legal crime, it's a betrayal of the very being, the very nature of truth and the document's purpose. It shatters the fundamental contract between language and justice.
So you see, being under oath isn't just a saying. It means you have voluntarily put your words into a special category. It's a moral hierarchy where truth is treated as sacred and lying is no longer just a personal mistake. It now carries the full force and power of the law. All right, so let's bring all these layers together now. You've got the internal promise, the written word, the official ritual, and the legal consequences. They all combine to create this final covenant of credibility. And that's what gives this document its real power. At the end of the day, an affidavit is really a three-way agreement. It's a pact between you, the person making the statement, the witness, who is the notary, and the state, which gives the document its legal authority. This pact is what makes your words powerful, but only within a specific legal territory, a jurisdictional zone where that state's authority is actually recognized. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The affidavit is this highly formal, ritualized covenant of credibility. But just think about it for a second. What are the informal promises, the unwritten affidavits of trust that we all rely on our own lives every single day? It really makes you realize how much of our world is just built on the power of a simple, honest word.